The story opens on a cold February morning in 1988 at Shadyside High School, where the hallways buzz with excitement about the upcoming Prom Queen election. Lori Campbell stands at her locker, a quiet junior with frizzy brown hair and thrift store clothes, watching as the popular girls strut past. She clutches a worn copy of The Shining against her chest, her only companion in a school that barely notices her existence. Her best friend, Danny, a theater kid with sharp wit and even sharper eyeliner, rushes up to her with shocking news. Someone has nominated Lori for Prom Queen as a joke, and the ballot is already posted in the main hallway. Lori's heart sinks as she approaches the bulletin board, where a crowd has gathered. Laughter erupts from the crowd as Brittany reads Lori's name aloud, her voice dripping with mockery. She asks if they're voting for most likely to die alone now. Lori feels a familiar burn of humiliation, but something in her refuses to back down this time. She's lived in the shadow of Fear Street's curse her whole life, surviving her mother's mysterious death 5 years ago. She won't be made invisible anymore. That night, Lori walks home down Fear Street, where twisted trees claw at the darkening sky and abandoned houses watch with broken windows like dead eyes. The street has a reputation throughout Shadyside, a history of tragedy dating back to the town's founding. Her father works late shifts at the mill, leaving her alone in their creaking house. As she studies in her room, the news plays on her small television. The anchor reports that Veronica Mills was found dead in the school swimming pool after cheerleading practice, drowned in water turned crimson red. The official statement calls it a tragic accident, but witnesses reported seeing a figure in a vintage prom dress and grotesque, rotting queen's crown near the pool house. Lori's blood runs cold. This is no accident. This is Fear Street's curse, awakened and hungry. The next morning, Shadyside High is paralyzed with grief and fear. Police cars crowd the parking lot, and students huddle in groups, whispering theories. Principal Hendricks announces that prom will go on as planned because Veronica would have wanted it that way, a statement that feels hollow and desperate. Lori notices that the remaining candidates react differently to the tragedy. Brittany seems more concerned about her chances of winning now that her main competition is gone. Jessica appears genuinely devastated, tears streaming down her face as she clutches her boyfriend's hand. Rachel stands apart from everyone, sketching frantically in her notebook with charcoal-stained fingers. Danny pulls Lori aside in the bathroom, their usual meeting spot for crisis talks. He tells her she needs to drop out of the race immediately because everyone knows about the Fear Street curse, and they know about her mother. Lori wants to, desperately, but something stops her. A stubborn pride, or maybe the feeling that running would prove everyone right about her. In English class, Lori sits behind Brittany, who turns around with a cruel smile. She suggests that maybe Lori killed Veronica to improve her chances, since everyone knows how badly she wants to be noticed. The accusation is absurd, but Lori sees doubt flicker in other students' eyes. She's the outsider, the girl from Fear Street, the daughter of a woman who died under mysterious circumstances. She's always been the easy scapegoat. After class, Jessica approaches Lori with unexpected kindness. She says she doesn't believe the rumors and thinks it's brave that Lori hasn't dropped out. They share a moment of genuine connection. Two girls trying to survive the pressure cooker of high school. Jessica mentions that she's been receiving strange notes in her locker, old-fashioned letters written in elegant script that quote poems about death and beauty. She thought it was a prank, but now she's terrified. That evening, Lori researches the history of Shadyside High in the town library, a Gothic building that smells of decay and secrets. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Berman, remembers everything about Shadyside's dark past. She tells Lori about the 1950 prom, when a girl named Elizabeth Crane was humiliated in front of the entire school after someone revealed her secret pregnancy. Elizabeth, who had been favored to win Prom Queen, ran out into the night and was never seen alive again. The case was ruled a suicide, but rumors persisted that she was murdered by one of the other candidates who wanted the crown. Mrs. Behrman's voice drops to a whisper as she explains that every few decades, when the veil between the living and dead grows thin, Elizabeth returns to seek revenge on those who would compete for the crown she never got to wear. Laurie leaves the library as darkness falls, her mind racing with this new information. She tries to call Jessica to warn her, but there's no answer. A sense of dread overwhelms her as she runs toward the school, where Jessica mentioned she'd be staying late for student council. The building is nearly empty, lit only by emergency lights that cast long shadows. Laurie searches the hallways, calling Jessica's name, her voice echoing off lockers. She finds the student council room locked, but through the window, she sees Jessica slumped over the table, surrounded by scattered papers and broken glass. The crown from the prom supplies lies next to her head, its plastic jewels smeared with blood. The fire alarm suddenly blares through the building, and sprinklers activate, drenching everything in cold water. In the chaos, Laurie sees her, a girl in a rotting 1950s prom dress, her face pale and hollow, a crown of twisted metal and thorns embedded in her skull. Elizabeth Crane stares at Laurie with empty eyes before vanishing into the flooded hallway. The police ruled Jessica's death as another tragic accident, a fall that resulted in a fatal head injury, despite the impossible circumstances. Shadyside is a town that has learned to rationalize the irrational, to explain away the supernatural because acknowledging it would mean confronting centuries of darkness. Principal Hendricks announces that the Prom Queen election will be postponed out of respect, but the damage is done. 3 candidates remain: Brittany, Rachel, and Laurie. Laurie becomes increasingly isolated, with even Danny keeping his distance after his mother forbids him from associating with anyone involved in the cursed election. She understands but feels more alone than ever. Laurie begins experiencing nightmares that feel more like memories. She dreams of her mother, beautiful and young, standing in front of the Shadyside High bulletin board, her name listed as a Prom Queen nominee in 1983. She dreams of her mother's fear, her desperate attempts to withdraw from the race, and the night she died on Fear Street, her car wrapped around a tree, wearing the dress she'd bought for prom. Laurie wakes gasping, realizing that her mother was one of Elizabeth's victims, and that the curse has been hunting her family for decades. She also understands now why her father never talks about that time, why he works himself to exhaustion rather than spend time in a house where her mother's ghost might linger. At school, Laurie tries to warn Brittany and Rachel about the curse, but they react with hostility. Brittany, who has become increasingly paranoid and aggressive, accuses Laurie of trying to scare them into dropping out, so she can win by default. She reveals that she's hired a private investigator to look into Laurie's background, convinced that Laurie is the killer. She admits that she's seen Elizabeth, too, in her art studio late at night, and that she's been painting the dead girl's portrait obsessively. She shows Laurie her sketchbook, filled with disturbing images of Elizabeth in various states of decay, always wearing that crown of thorns. Rachel confesses that part of her wants to understand Elizabeth, to know what it feels like to be so wrong that you'd return from death seeking vengeance. Laurie realizes that Rachel might be more dangerous than the ghost because she's romanticizing the horror. That night, Laurie receives a phone call from a voice that sounds like it's coming from underwater, garbled and ancient. The voice whispers that she cannot escape her legacy, that Fear Street always claims its own, and that the crown will be hers whether she wants it or not. Terrified, Laurie tries to reach her father at work, but he's unreachable. She's alone in the house when the lights begin to flicker, and she hears footsteps on the stairs. She speaks in a voice filled with sorrow and rage, telling Lori that she understands what it's like to be humiliated, to be made to feel worthless. She extends a skeletal hand, offering Lori a deal: embrace the curse, become like her, and together they can punish everyone who has ever made them feel invisible. Lori refuses, screaming at the ghost to leave her alone, and Elizabeth's face contorts with fury before she vanishes. The next day at school, Brittany is absent, and rumors spread quickly. Some say she's dropped out of the race, others that she's transferred schools. The truth is revealed when police cars arrive at noon. Brittany's body has been found in the school's trophy case, posed like a mannequin, a plastic prom crown jammed onto her head with such force that it cracked her skull. Principal Hendricks has no choice but to cancel prom entirely, but it's too late. The election has already been decided by elimination. Only two candidates remain, Rachel and Lori. Lori finds Rachel in the art room, surrounded by hundreds of paintings of Elizabeth, covering every wall, every surface. Rachel has gone pale and gaunt, as if she's being drained of life itself. She tells Lori that she's been dreaming of 1950, experiencing Elizabeth's memories, feeling her pain and rage. She says that Elizabeth was in love with a boy named Thomas, who promised her everything, and then abandoned her when she got pregnant. It was Thomas who spread the rumor at prom, who humiliated her in front of everyone. But it wasn't suicide that killed Elizabeth. It was the other prom queen candidates, jealous and cruel, who followed her into the woods and murdered her, staging it to look like she took her own life. Rachel's eyes glitter with tears as she says that Elizabeth deserves a revenge, that maybe they all deserve to die for being part of a system that crushes girls and discards them. Lori tries to reason with her, but Rachel is too far gone, seduced by the ghost narrative of justified vengeance. That evening, Lori returns to the library to find Mrs. Berman. The old librarian reveals the final piece of the puzzle. Elizabeth's murder was never solved because the girls who killed her went on to become Shadyside's most respected citizens. They were protected by their families, by money and influence, and the truth was buried along with Elizabeth. But curses don't care about power or privilege. Every generation, Elizabeth returns during prom season, killing the candidates until she finds one worthy of understanding her pain, someone she can make into her successor. Mrs. Behrman's voice cracks as she admits that she was one of the girls who witnessed the murder in 1950 and did nothing to stop it. She's lived with that guilt for decades, watching as Elizabeth claimed victim after victim. She tells Lori that there might be one way to end the curse: find Elizabeth's real grave and give her the justice she was denied. Lori convinces Danny to help her despite the danger. Their friendship has survived too much to abandon each other now. Together, they sneak into the Fear Street Cemetery at midnight, armed with flashlights and old newspaper clippings that might lead them to Elizabeth's true resting place. The cemetery is a maze of crooked headstones and crumbling mausoleums, wrapped in mist that seems to whisper warnings. They search for hours, digging through records and examining every grave from 1950, until Danny discovers something strange: a grave marker for unknown girl, 1950, hidden behind a collapsed crypt. They begin to dig, their hands raw and bleeding, until they uncover a simple wooden coffin. Inside is Elizabeth's skeleton, still wearing the remains of her homemade prom dress, the crown of thorns rusted but intact. But there's something else. Newspaper clippings naming her killers, evidence she gathered before her death, buried with her as a final testament. Armed with the evidence, Lori and Danny go to the police, but they're dismissed as hysterical teenagers caught up in urban legends. The descendants of Elizabeth's killers are still powerful in Shadyside, and no one wants to dig up the past. Frustrated but not defeated, Lori decides to take matters into her own hands. She calls a meeting with Rachel, pretending to agree that they should honor Elizabeth together. They meet at the school gymnasium, which has been decorated for the prom that will never happen. Streamers and balloons hang from the ceiling, and a glittering crown sits on display near the empty throne where the prom queen would have sat. Rachel is already there, painting a mural of Elizabeth on the wall, her movements frantic and possessed. Laurie tries to reach the real Rachel underneath the ghost's influence. She talks about their shared experiences of being overlooked and underestimated, but also about the danger of letting pain turn into something monstrous. For a moment, Rachel wavers, tears streaming down her face, and it seems like Laurie might have broken through. But then Elizabeth manifests fully, more solid and powerful than ever before. The ghost steps between them, her presence causing the temperature to plummet, frost spreading across the floor. She tells Laurie that justice is not enough, that the families of her killers must pay, that their daughters and granddaughters must suffer as she suffered. Laurie realizes with horror that she and Rachel aren't just candidates anymore. They're bait in Elizabeth's larger plan of generational revenge. The gymnasium doors slam shut, and the lights begin to strobe wildly. Elizabeth's power fills the space, and supernatural chaos erupts. Bleachers collapse, and the decorations come alive like vengeful spirits. Rachel screams as she's lifted into the air by invisible hands, Elizabeth's rage channeling through her. Laurie runs for the evidence she brought, the old newspaper clippings and court documents that prove Elizabeth's murder. She begins reading aloud, shouting the names of the killers, demanding that the truth be heard. The ghosts of Elizabeth's murderers appear, elderly women whose faces Laurie recognizes from Shadyside Society pages, now transparent and terrified. Elizabeth turns her attention to them, her revenge finally within reach. But as Elizabeth moves toward her killers, Laurie realizes that revenge won't end the curse. It will only make it stronger, binding Elizabeth to her rage forever. She steps between the ghost and her targets, a terrified girl facing down a force of pure vengeance. Laurie speaks directly to Elizabeth, not as a victim or an enemy, but as someone who understands. She acknowledges the injustice done to Elizabeth, the cruelty and betrayal, but she also begs her to break the cycle instead of perpetuating it. She tells Elizabeth that she deserves peace, not revenge, and that being remembered for her pain is not the same as being remembered for who she truly was. Tears stream down Laurie's face as she promises to tell Elizabeth's real story, to make sure the world knows about the girl she was before tragedy destroyed her. Elizabeth falters, her form flickering between the vengeful spirit and the young, hopeful girl she once was. The crown of thorns begins to glow in otherworldly light, and for the first time, Laurie sees past the horror to the broken heart underneath. The ghost of Thomas appears, not as he was in life, but as he should have been, apologetic, sorrowful, ready to face what he did. The spirits of Elizabeth's killers bow their heads in shame, finally admitting their crime after decades of denial. Elizabeth looks at them all, at the acknowledgement she's waited 70 years to receive, and then she turns to Laurie. She reaches out and touches Laurie's face with a hand that feels like cold wind, and whispers a single word. Free. The crown dissolves into light, and Elizabeth's form becomes young and whole again, her prom dress beautiful instead of rotted, her smile peaceful. She fades into the light, finally released from her curse, taking the spirits of her killers with her to face whatever judgment awaits. The gymnasium returns to normal, silent except for the sound of Laurie's ragged breathing. Rachel collapses to the floor, freed from possession, and Danny bursts through the doors with teachers and police officers. In the aftermath, the story of Elizabeth Crane becomes headline news. Laurie keeps her promise, working with journalists to expose the truth about the 1950 murder and cover-up. The families of the killers are forced to confront their ancestors' crimes, and a memorial is established in Elizabeth's honor. Shadyside High holds a special assembly where Elizabeth is posthumously awarded the title of Prom Queen, the crown placed on her restored grave in a proper ceremony. Prom is rescheduled for late spring, and Laurie attends with Danny as her date, both of them dressed in thrift store formal wear that makes them feel like themselves. The Prom Queen election has been abolished, replaced with a scholarship fund in Elizabeth's name. Rachel, still recovering from her ordeal, creates a mural in the school hallway depicting Elizabeth not as a ghost, but as a real girl with dreams and hopes. Lori dances under the glittering lights, no longer invisible, but not seeking the spotlight either. She's learned that true power comes not from crowns or popularity, but from having the courage to stand up for what's right, even when you're terrified. As the night ends and students spill out into the parking lot, Lori takes one last look at the school. She sees, just for a moment, the shimmer of a figure in the shadows, Elizabeth, no longer vengeful but watching with approval. Lori raises her hand in a small wave, a gesture of goodbye and understanding between two girls separated by decades but connected by shared pain and ultimate redemption. The figure smiles and fades away completely, and Lori knows that Fear Street's curse has finally been broken. She walks home with Danny, laughing about the terrible DJ and the spiked punch. Two survivors of something most people would never believe. Fear Street looks different now, less menacing in the moonlight, just a street with a dark history instead of an inescapable doom. Lori's father is waiting up for her, and for the first time in years, they talk about her mother. Really talk, sharing memories and grief and love. He tells her that she reminds him of his wife, brave and stubborn, and unwilling to back down from what scares her. Lori falls asleep that night with a sense of peace she hasn't felt since her mother died, knowing that some curses can be broken, some ghosts can find rest, and that even in a town like Shadyside, hope can survive the darkness. The final scene shows the Fear Street Cemetery in dawn light, where Elizabeth's restored grave is covered in flowers left by students. The headstone now reads, Elizabeth Crane, 1932 to 1950, beloved daughter, forever Prom Queen. A single butterfly lands on the stone, and in the distance, the sound of teenage laughter echoes from Shadyside High, where a new generation of students arrives for another day, free from the curse that haunted their predecessors. Fear Street remains, but its power has been diminished by truth, compassion, and one girl's refusal to let history repeat itself.